These are the 0.5a notes for pre-calc. We're going to talk about distance and midpoint today. So how do I find the distance and midpoint? You have two options to find the distance. The first is your distance formula, option 1. And the distance formula looks like this. You have d equals d for distance and a big square root bar. And then x2 minus x1 squared, y2 minus y1 squared. So we're going to do example number 1 using the distance formula. So it's going to be d equals, and it's important that we label the points. x1 and y1 just mean the first points. And then x2 and y2, the reason they have the 2 is, again, just because that's the second point. And I highly suggest labeling. Most of the mistakes I see on these problems come from not labeling it correctly or not labeling at all, and then putting everything in the wrong place. x2, 5, minus x1, 1, square that. y2, 6, minus y1, 3, and square that. Simplify 5 minus 1 to get 4, 6 minus 3 to get 3. 4 squared is 16, 3 squared is 9. Add those together to make 25 and take the square root of that to get 5. The second option as to how you could do this problem is using the Pythagorean theorem. That is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And I recommend that when you have a graph or 2 points that have already been plotted. So example 2, find the length of the line segment. That just means distance. That connects points A and B in the graph below, rounded to the nearest tenth place, so 1 decimal. All right, in order to do this, we're going to draw a triangle out of the points A and B. And we're going to count our blocks or steps up and down. So on the left-hand side, we've got 3 up, 3 down, and then on the bottom we have 9. And those are going to be the legs of our triangle, which are going to represent our A and B. So it'll look like 3 squared plus 9 squared equals c squared. C squared is the hypotenuse, diagonal. And then we just simplify it out. Square root at the end. And as you type that into your calculator, you're going to get an answer of 9.5. Let me show you where the calculator. All right, so here's our calculator. And the square root, you're going to have to hit the second button right here. And then this button right here, you can see in the top left corner, it's got that square root bar right where that x squared is. So you hit that. As long as you hit second first, it should pop up, and then you can type in your 90. And again, we're rounding to 1 decimal place, so 9.48. The 8 will cause it to bump up to 9.5. All right, next problem, example number 3. Again, this one doesn't have a graph, so I'm going to do this using the distance formula. And this time they're just naming the points, point 1, P1, and P2, point 2. That doesn't change anything about how we're doing this problem. We do have a lot of negatives here, so be careful with the minuses and negatives. x2, negative 5, minus x1, negative 3. So notice there's a minus and a negative right there. And then y2 minus y1 minus negative 6. Our double negatives turn into positives. So plus, plus. And then we can simplify. Negative 2 squared, 8 squared. Negative 2 squared is 4. 8 squared, 64. That gets me 68 when I add them together. And again, typing into your calculator, square root of 68 gets us 8.25. So again, just be careful with the math. If you type it into delta and you have rounded it wrong, it is going to mark it as incorrect. So please be careful. Square root of 68, you can see here that it's 246. 6 is large enough, it'll bump up to 25 instead of 24. Anything 5 and higher is going to bump up. All right, next problem here. We're going to talk next about midpoint. Again, two ways to do midpoint. You've got your midpoint formula. And the midpoint formula, it's actually a point. So that's why we have the parentheses. We'll have x1 plus x2, divide that by 2. Dividing by 2 has to do with the middle, halfway. And then you have y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Find the midpoint of the line segment joining 10, negative 2. That's going to be my x1 and my y1. And 7, 4, x2, y2. And we'll do 10 plus 7, x's, and then the y's. Combine. And then just divide those out. It's perfectly fine to get decimals here. And then your final answer is the ordered pair, 8.51. Another way to do the midpoint is to just use graph and just kind of count it out. So a lot of students can just look at A and B and kind of try to find the middle between those two. I've seen some students try to draw a line. I've seen other students just use their fingers to count in. But if you can see, the middle point is going to be about right there. If you could see that, then that's all you need to do, and your midpoint is 3, 1. If not, here's how I like to think about it. To get from A to B, I walked down, how far? 8. And over, how far? 4. So if you want to go just halfway, you would walk down 4 and over 2. Down 4 and over 2. You would just do half of that distance. If neither of those ways makes sense to you, then you would simply go back to your midpoint formula. You would just have to find these points. This would be 1, 5. And this would be 5, negative 3. And then you could just do x1, y1, x2, y2. And that'll end up getting you the same answer as 3, 1. All right, example number 6 is talking about Indianapolis Colts tickets and their price. So it does ask us to find the midpoint to estimate the ticket price in 1997. So at the beginning, we have 1993, and that's paired up with $28. That's going to be like our X1 and Y1. And then we'll have 2001 and 56. That'll be our X2 and Y2. We're not going to be able to graph this, so I'm just going to do this using the regular midpoint formula. 1993 plus 2001 divided by 2. And 28 plus 56 divided by 2. That gets me 3994 over 2 and 84 over 2. Which then gets me 1997, which is what they were asking about. And the most important number, 42. So ticket prices were $42. And that's it.